Welcome, listeners of Illusion to Temporal Discussion, the episode-by-episode Nightmare Retrospective podcast. I'm Martin Harder, and I never forget my memory.
And I'm Martin O'Doney, the snack you can suck on between meals without spoiling your appetite.
So today we're looking at Series 2, Episode 15, originally broadcast on December the 12th, 1988. Cliff Richard's Mistletoe and Wine was still number one, and the movie top in the box office was Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
We've been well over Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I think. You and I guessed the other week. I could have done an entire podcast just on that.
You can never go over Who Framed Roger Rabbit too much. Some people say that Back to the Future is a perfect film. I disagree. I say Roger Rabbit is a perfect film.
I should say on the subject of Mistletoe and Wine, Cliff Richard does irritate, but I did quite like Saviour's Day from a couple of years later, purely because some of the instrumentation is done very well on it. But Mistletoe and Wine, a bit cheesy. So Mistletoe, Cheese and Wine.
It's not a particularly bad song. It's just not a particularly good song either.
It's just a Christmas song, and Christmas songs in the charts, they just tend to be just there. Nothing terribly interesting.
And now time turns. The recording light burns. Time out is gone. The podcast is on.
Welcome, watchers. Brace yourselves, for this is where adventure lurks. Guard greets you, and the dungeon defeats you. At least it will, unless you're cunning, that is. Cunning wits are currently at work in my catacombs, so let's check how they're progressing in the traditional manner. Here's a dungeon ditty. Young Antony and his men from Hants came up against a pit of worms, but though a Viking they defied, their luck was out when Lilith cried. For potion was her urgent wish, whilst humbugs was their proffered dish. So down they went, and out as well, for quest was over when they fell. And now Steve and chums are in my lair. They hail from Weston-Super-Mare. The shield's their quest, but they have found a talisman with magic powers. It makes Steve visible to none. A cunning trick and rather fun. So let's find out just how they've used it. A troll is here. Have they confused it?
And we start, as ever, with a dungeon ditty, and this one is bad.
I think this is the first time that it's actually been referred to in the show as a dungeon ditty.
I think so, yeah. It frequently says this awful ditty, and he's frequently correct. But I think that is the actual time. That's the time it's actually called a dungeon ditty. It's not a good one, though. Go for it, Mr. H, if you can bear to bring yourself to.
Straight off the bat, I would say they tried to rhyme Hants with worms, but they didn't.
No, they didn't.
They didn't try.
It is a virtual rhyme, and that is it. And only just barely.
It's not even
virtually.
a virtual rhyme, just two words that don't rhyme.
Yeah, it's two words that end with S. Defied and cried is all right. Wish and dish is okay. Well and fell. Lair and mare is almost quite clever in its way. But then you got found and powers. And then none and fun is okay but obvious. And then use it and confused it. No. That's really forcing it. I'm afraid it's a fail. It's a fail this week. You can see why they got rid of them, really, can't you? It's a pity in a way, but at the same time, you actually look at them closely. A lot of them don't really work.
We rejoin Stephen and his friends Mark, Paul, and Chris as they face off against the troll. They're carrying a magical emblem that turns Stephen invisible when he touches it, and a gauntlet with which to handle it when not in use. Through a rather tedious cycle of switching between visible and invisible, the team make it to the next area.
Become invisible again, quick. Right. Take one pace forward. Turn left a little bit. Better check position, yeah? Check position. Right. Hold it again, become invisible, quick. Right, now walk forward.
Check position.
Yep.
Carry on.
Become invisible. Walk forward. Where am I? You're in a wooden sort of house with two doors at the far end of the wall either side. There's a sort of old woman with a stick with a cauldron by her.
Mildred looks around, confused, as Stephen is still invisible. The team instructs him to become visible again.
Stephen, let go of the emblem.
Right.
Hello? Young mugwump? Lost, are you? Well, never mind. You don't look worth finding. and you don't look as though you've got a halfpenny to call your own, let alone any spells or any magic. Now, if you had some magic to show Mildred, she, Mildred, could show you the way to go.
So Mildred is claiming here that he doesn't look like he has any magic, but he's literally just made himself visible in front of her. That doesn't make sense to me.
She might have assumed he was just hiding behind the cauldron or something, although that's a bloody stupid place to hide, seeing there's a gigantic fire under it. That's one possibility. Am I the only one, though, who thinks that Mildred is made to look a bit feeble and even a bit sycophantic here? It's not completely out of character, but she really does snivel. She lacks any air of authority or menace as a result. There's normally a sort of balance between her being a bit of a menace and also being potentially quite a useful sort of short-term ally. So what you got here is basically Uriah Heep in a witch's outfit.
Yeah, usually she's out to get something from the Dungeoneer, but she doesn't gain anything from this.
There's nothing. She's basically just there to give a little clue to the team, and then they ignore it anyway. So
Yeah.
that makes her seem doubly ineffective. Oh, they didn't even listen to her.
So in response to this accusation that they don't seem to have any magic, Stephen uses the emblem again.
Looks a mercy! Oh! Where have you gone?
Come back.
Where have you gone? Manifest yourself at once. Oh, there you are. Oh, skill. Skill. No use in poor old Mildred trying to meddle with you. Oh, no, Your Highness, Your Majesty, Your magicianship.
So Mildred informs Stephen that the left-hand door is the correct route and that the door on the right leads to a bomb room. She bids him farewell. And as I mentioned, the team promptly ignore this advice and lead Stephen out through the door on the right. Oh dear, oh dear. I wonder where they're going to wind up.
That's it, keep going. Where am I? Bomb room, Stephen.
Bum, 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 room. Be fast on your feet before your life was complete. Bum room, bum, 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 room. So Mildred was telling the truth after all. The team f***s up royally, and Stephen almost runs headfirst into a wall. If it weren't for a serious case of magic bomb fuse, their quest would have ended here.
Probably should have. I can understand any team who's suspicious of advice they get from Mildred, but yeah, you do think they've dodged a bullet. Perhaps Tim Child realised that there wasn't enough time left in the season to start another quest and get it to the end, so he wanted to persist with this lot.
But then after that, they do start another quest.
Yeah, well, that was when that was when they definitely failed. But I do think, as I'll go into details later, I do think it probably would have been better if this team had killed off here.
Just slightly right, slightly right.
Quick,
Slightly
go,
right.
turn.
Quick.
Go, Stephen,
Left,
turn. Left,
Forward,
quick.
Left, side step, left.
Side step,
left.
Side
And
step.
again, forward. Where am I? You're in a room with one exit in front of you, and there's a lion's head above the exit. And on the floor to your left now, there's a key and some bread on a green little...
A life force energy critical team.
The advisors guide Stephen to the object. The bread goes in the knapsack, and Stephen picks up the key. He leaves the emblem and the gauntlet behind.
The laser beam then comes out and takes out the floor tile right in front of Stephen, and the team then decide to take him till halfway to the end of the universe to suggest that Stephen might want to take a step back from the hole right in front of his feet.
Stand back. Take a step back.
Stephen, take a step back.
And from there, they slowly guide him around the hole and walk him, and I'd use the word walk very advisedly, to the exit.
They do tell him to run.
Yeah, they probably did freeze in panic a little bit when the shot hits the stone right in front of him. It was clearly very carefully designed to do that. And that is going to make you panic, especially if you haven't seen it before. But they do seem to take a long time just to say, take a step back.
Walk forward, quick.
Where am I? You're in a roundish room with a well in front of you. We're a
Beware
wheel.
the mindless threat of the mechanical warrior.
The well is locked, but luckily Stephen has the key. The automaton wanders into the chamber, and the team quickly for this team anyway, they instruct him to unlock the well and climb in. So Foley's clue last episode was to wait until the chamber was empty before using the key. But I'm wondering if this team had just been so bloody slow that they chucked the automaton in.
I took it as meaning unlock the well before anything arrives. You can interpret it both ways, I suppose. The ultimatum is basically just in there as a random hurry-up creature, just like the goblins and the Skullhorn things are. So they might have just thrown them in at random. But you can interpret it probably as meaning, get this done quickly, something will be after you.
Maybe.
That was quite a well-done well-way scene, to be fair.
Yeah.
Stephen,
Right.
hold out the key.
And climb into the well.
Get down.
Crouch down.
Get off it! Scummy! What do you think you are? Some sort of flying insect? A cockroach, perhaps? Yeah, that's it. You're a cockroach!
Oh dear, that was unlucky, Stephen. Cedric the Mad Monk is never pleased to see visitors, and now he's most displeased.
Alison, scumbag!
Somebody's moved the well again, and Stephen lands right on top of Cedric. Cedric is obviously a little peeved about this and tells Stephen if he wants to prove that he's human and not cockroach, he should challenge the monk.
This is actually one of the better scenes for Cedric dialogue. Sadly, the riddles he comes up with are easier to answer than ever, but I do like one or two of the lines that Cedric throws. I love a lot of Cedric's insults aimed at the Dungeoneers anyway, but I think this is the calculation one is actually really rather neat. And I'll tread on you. I've always giggled at that.
It's a good thing, I suppose, that they are easy riddles, because Stephen doesn't confer once with his teammates.
This
during
is
entire
very
scene.
true. I think he's getting as impatient with his teammates as anybody else is.
Now listen carefully. Here is my first.
In your best Cedric ease, if you please, Mr. H.
A maid, a mouse, and a mad March hare all sat down to eat some fare. Now tell me, little scummy friend, whose party did they all attend?
Very good, very good. It was, of course, the Mad Hatter's tea party. He got it right, and, as you say, no waiting for any conferral with his friends. Stephen is just straight in with the answer, and he's got it right. So, what's the second riddle, Mr. Cedric?
Cry for sorrow, cry for pain, cry for anger, cry for shame. One creature cries for none of these. Name me the creature that cries false tears.
I never actually noticed, in all the times that I've watched this episode, that riddle is actually meant to be a virtual rhyme. It's only on the notes that you sent me, pointing out to me, that I ever actually realised that. That's how bad a virtual rhyme it is. So again, Stephen just jumped straight in with the correct answer. But yeah, they are actually trying to say that Z's is a rhyme of tears, and it's such a bad rhyme. I didn't notice that they were trying to do it. I don't know if that makes me stupid or them. I really don't. I do love Cedric. It's such a shame that this is it for him, unfortunately.
Oh God, it is, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, a moment of silence for our fallen hero.
Here is my third, and you better look sharp. What food should you eat to see in the dark?
Again, that's a virtual rhyme, but not a good one.
It's better than most, to be honest.
It's better than some of the ones we've seen so far in this episode, that's true.
And I do like the way they incorporated "here's my third" into the actual riddle. But also, it's a fallacy as well. Carrots don't help you see in the dark.
I was going to say the answer is completely untrue. Carrots have no particular effect on people's night vision. It's an urban myth that was supposedly invented during the Second World War by none other than Winston Churchill. There was a shortage of some vegetables in the winter of 1940, but there was a real really big glut of carrot stocks to keep the population ticking over. And to encourage people to put up with eating so many carrots, he put about the idea that they were good for seeing in the dark, which people needed to do at that point because they need to switch the lights off during air raids. It made it sound like a really practical thing to eat, but it's look, carrots have no effect on your vision one way or the other, as far as I know. Certainly not on your night vision. They might help you focus a bit better, although I've never seen any evidence of that either. But night vision, no, absolute goblin horns.
So Stephen's 3 for 3 with no help from the rest of his team. Cedric gives him the food, which Divider Paul seems to find very funny for some reason.
He really needs to catch up on understanding the rules of Nightmare.
I think it's the use of the word grub.
It's not the first time Cedric's used it. He says it more often than he says food, as far as I remember.
Cedric warns Stephen that if he wants to pass Her Highness, he'll have to overcome his shyness.
Music to her ears is what she needs. So whistle or sing if you want to proceed.
Cedric also gives the team the spell Avant and warns them not to use it on anything that Stephen can touch. Treguard reminds Stephen that he can command Cedric, and he does so.
I command you.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, again, no waiting to be prompted by the advisors by Stephen. Very good. This kid wants to get on with it, even if they don't.
But I'm not coming with you. Not where you're going, I'm not. Tell you what, though, I'll give you a password. It's called Defender, for what use it is.
And with this useful information, the team move on.
It's not a particularly profound final scene for Cedric. It's nothing like as dramatic as the duel by insults or the showdown with Gumboil. But it's got some good lines in it, and it's an okay send-off for was probably the best early character in Nightmare. It's a pity they won't have more from him, because I do think there was a lot more they could do with him.
Goodbye, Cedric. We will miss you.
We do. We really do. We wish he'd come back. Well, we wish Nightmare would come back first.
Where am I? Stephen, you're in a sort of stone room with 3 doors. One directly in front of you, and the other 2 to the left and right. And there's sort of a spider on the wall.
A dire warning, team. Here lurks Ariadne, queen of all arachnids. Once she captures you, there's no escape.
The team have now wound up in Ariadne's lair. Ariadne quickly webs up all the exits, but Stephen heeds Cedric's advice and whistles a jolly tune. The webs dissolve and Stephen leaves through the middle exit.
Does that scene actually make any sense at all when you think about it?
Do most of the scenes in Nightmare make any sense at all?
Well, no, but that's neither here nor there. The point is this one definitely doesn't. Why would him whistling, especially whistling a cheery tune like that, cause the spider to run away? But also, why is it when Ariadne wanders off, the webs just dissolve? Why don't the webs just stay there?
The answer to that question, of course, is Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
And walk out. Walk forward. Where am I? You're in a sort of...
Stand quite still, Stephen. You've reached the clue room, but a cavern wraith is either guarding or emanating from one of these objects. There is food here, but a close encounter will cost you dearly in life force.
We've often said that the level 2 clue room is the best place to have a haunting, and we're not disappointed here. The cavern wraith's presence is easily excised via the use of magic.
Spellcasting. A V A U N T.
It almost looks like there are laser beams shooting from the horns of the Helmet of Justice and dissolving the ghost. But that's not what should be implied, though. Avaunt is just Old English for go away. So it seems more likely that it's just sent the ghost to somewhere else in the dungeon.
It did kind of have a bit of a Ghostbusters feel to it, didn't it?
It did. And we got to remember that Ghostbusters was a fellow show alongside Nightmare on CITV at the time. So it's perfectly possible that the real Ghostbusters was actually having an influence on its sister program there. And why not? The real Ghostbusters is a bloody brilliant cartoon. It's fantastic. Well worth taking inspiration from.
That is the crossover we deserve.
Yeah, definitely. The real Ghostbusters go dungeoneering. That'd be a hell of a great episode of Nightmare and a great episode of Ghostbusters. So anyway, the team moves Stephen over to the banister and guides him down the steps and over to the altar, upon which there are a pie, a bar of gold, an emblem, and a key.
Right, take the pie. Right, okay, Stephen, take the key. And the...
Hey! Put me down!
Oh, fuck.
Put me down this instant!
Oh, f***ing.
Nobody's picking me up without a proper introduction!
So, ladies and gentlemen, the entity that we are having to deal with has been absent for almost the entirety of season 2. And it's one of the reasons why most of season 2 is great fun to watch. But Casper, the world's most irritating door locking device, is back with a vengeance. And a very, very painful and agonizing vengeance, if I may say so. He tells Stephen that he can open anything for him. And the team instructs Stephen to take Casper in the gold bar and guide him out.
I got to this point when I was writing this, and my wife was sitting in the room, and she suddenly went, "Oh, good, I like him." I told her to get out.
Do you remember the podcast I did with Amy for episode 3? And she said, "What's wrong with Casper?" You're not going to be a guest on one of these ever again.
Where am I? You're on a sort of bridge across a deep sort of drop around some caves or something. You've just come out of one, looks like. And there's someone lying just in front of you.
Intruder alert level 2. Gumboil the Magnificence. Ever alert as usual. Halt! Halt! Intruder! The password or you perish.
Caution, team. Just because this guard appears to have had one too many doesn't mean he's not dangerous.
Gumball's been on the dungeon juice again, and this time he's been drinking on duty. In fact, he's so drunk that he can't even tell which direction Stephen's in. This team giggle as he demands the posh word.
Gumball's profound subtitle, preceded by the definite article this week, is the Magnificent.
Yes.
I actually think he means the Magners drinker.
So this is something that was quite prevalent in 1980s and 1990s kids shows. The assumption that alcoholism is actually funny.
Yeah, the assumption that just makes you entertaining and not incredibly repulsive and that it can destroy your life. It's not being discouraged by Nightmare, shall we say. There's a way of looking at that and saying this guy's not competent to fulfill his duty because he's drunk. But it doesn't seem to cost him his job or anything, so it doesn't actually discourage drinking too much. So yes, this is another one of those little details that it would be done rather differently today, I think, and probably should be.
It was a common thing back then, though, so we can't really blame anyone for that, really.
No, Edmund Dane is very good at portraying drunkenness, so what spoils the scene really is just having Casper speaking in it at all. But yeah, there are times when the use of drunkenness as a laugh, which carries on all the way through the series history. It doesn't stop here. There are times when I do just feel a little bit uncomfortable with it because it doesn't acknowledge how destructive alcoholism can be.
Okay, Stephen, say defender.
Defender.
Ah, just the job. Just the one. On you come.
Stephen almost passes safely, but then Casper has to ruin everything.
Walk forward, Stephen.
Drunken, thieving, incompetent dolt. I wouldn't
No,
give him the
stop.
time.
I heard that. Who are you calling drunken then? Who are you calling incontinent? Gumboil is offensive. Gumboil is deeply offensive, and Gumboil demands an apology.
Despite all this is actually one of my favourite Gumboil scenes. I think any scene where Gumboil has to do anything other than just ask for a password and then let them pass on, it does have some amount of entertainment in it.
To an extent, but even here, it has to be said, it's not something that he hasn't done before. Basically, he was drunk and rather easily got by in the Sorcerer's Stone scene with Folly, for instance, showing a lack of ideas on the part of the writer. Yeah, at least it's something different, but I just like a scene where Gumball is actually just a bit badass again. I think we'd pretty much established by the quarter-way stage of season 2 that Gumball had lost any air of menace he ever had completely. You almost know they're going to get past him with no great difficulty.
Stephen apologises, but Gumboil demands that Stephen give him something to prove how sorry he is. Stephen gives him the bar of gold and Gumboil allows him to pass.
That's a few bars of gold that Gumboil's got now. Maybe that's why he doesn't appear after the season. Maybe he's now rich enough to go off and do his own thing again.
No, he spends it all on dungeon juice.
That's possible. Yeah, I wonder where they get dungeon juice from.
Milking a troll?
After you. You do realise what milking a troll would have to involve, exactly what you'd have to squeeze to get liquid out of it. And no, not the horns on his head.
How do you know a troll doesn't have udders?
How do you know they do?
Went around lifting up their skirts.
Gold. That's just the thing. Just the job. On you go. One.
Right.
On you
Speed
go.
then, Steve.
But just
So
you
keep
watch
going.
that mouth in future.
Where am I? Hi, I'm Stephen. You're in a sort of wooden room with a door to your left. There's a letter M on the floor with a chair in front
It's
of you.
Merlin's room! But hey, what's that on the floor?
Understand, team. This is not that which you seek, but perhaps a signpost.
The team guides Stephen onto the letter M, but when he stands on it, nothing happens. Casper suggests that Stephen try touching it, so Stephen crouches down and touches the floor with his bare hand.
I don't see the point here.
No, I don't either. I don't see the point in having Casper with them at all, because in the end he didn't have anything to unlock. But when in the past, when people have stood on letters on the floor, that's been enough to lift them. For some reason, they have to physically use the skin of their hand to lift it here. Why? What's so different about this thing?
Literally all Casper has actually done is...
Cost them a bar of gold, basically, yeah. In this case, even the Dungeoneer has no excuse for defending or appreciating Casper at all.
Oh dear. I wish people wouldn't do that. Oh, hello. You must be Stephen.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I know who you are. I keep in touch, you see. My name's Merlin, by the way. Always has been, except once.
That was when it was Merlin!
Casper! That was another adventure.
Casper's about to say something. Merlin interrupts and says that was another adventure. You reckon it's a reference from The Sword in the Stone, where Sir Eck mispronounces Merlin as Marvin. That seems pretty likely to be, yes.
Because let's face it, other than Nightmare, that's probably where most Nightmare viewers actually knew Merlin from.
Probably. I'm not sure which version of the Legends of Arthur are the most famous. There's the Mallory Compendium, as it were, which bound together all of the Welsh legends into one coherent tome, was by far the most famous for some centuries. But The Sword in the Stone was kind of an early 20th century update, sort of redrafting Mallory's work into modern English.
A Disneyfication. Well, not even really a Disneyfication, because it was a book.
It's an anglicisation of a Welsh legend. This is an interesting question. I was having an argument online with somebody who was getting very upset about the forthcoming King Arthur movie that's going to have nothing but Asian actors performing in it. I rather like the idea. But a lot of the sort of reactionary skinhead types are really, really upset with it and saying, we don't want an Asian version of our legend. Oh, really? You're Welsh, are you? These stories that you know of are actually nothing like the original stories that the Welsh told.
Did you know also that the last version of King Arthur on film featured exclusively actors from the 21st century?
Yeah.
Shocking.
In the old Welsh legends, Merlin and Arthur never met. They weren't even in the same story. And Merlin wasn't this wizened old guy with a flowing white beard. He was actually a child who was the half-son of a demon. And this child was born with these remarkable powers and overthrew a king to make himself the ruler of Britain sometime after the departure of the Romans. It's got absolutely no resemblance whatsoever to the legends of Camelot. And Camelot wasn't even invented until the 12th century. It wasn't even invented until about 750 years after the first of these ancient Welsh legends was written.
Temporal discussion. Come for the Nightmare commentary. Stay for the crypto history lesson.
Sorry. By talking about this, I've stopped us having to talk about Casper the Key.
Marvin, I mean, Merlin tells Stephen that he's going to need magic, but first he's going to have to prove that him and his friends are smart enough to use it properly.
Now, listen, Stephen.
Sometimes I forget my name. Or one forgets to play the game. Sometimes one forgets one's head. But what does an elephant forget? Okay, first question. Are they trying to rhyme head with forget? Because that is the worst yet. And when I say the worst yet, I mean the worst rhyme in the history of Nightmare.
You can really tell it's the end of the series.
Yeah.
It should have been an easy one, and it's sad that they didn't get it. But why is there only one riddle this time around? It doesn't seem fair.
They might have needed two to win the spell, but having failed the first one, there was no chance of getting enough. So there was no point in asking the second. So to save time, they just dropped the second riddle.
They say memory, which obviously is wrong.
I'm not sure they understood the question, if I'm being quite honest. You can lose your memory, but do you forget your memory? Isn't that a contradiction in terms, in fact? To be quite honest, they probably deserve to lose just for coming up with an answer like that. They said memory.
There is actually some truth to the claim that elephants never forget, in that they do recognize the faces of other elephants they've met. In fact, there's a lot of human characteristics that are experienced by elephants. For example, elephants think humans are cute.
Temporal discussion. Come for the nightmare commentary. Stay for the zoology lesson.
So Merlin laments that he can't give out any magic this time. I'm rather happy that he doesn't, because I don't think they deserve any. But he warns Stevens about the dangers of Mogdred, just like we're back in season 1. He then tells Stephen to leave Casper on the floor. Please, Stephen, every time I watch this, I want you to tread on him, and you keep failing to. And the team then guides Stephen through the door at the rear of the chamber and leave him far behind. Sadly, this is still not Casper's final appearance.
It's a shame we had to say goodbye to Cedric before we had to say goodbye to Casper.
True. The irony is, it's the villain character is actually the one who's much more pleasant.
Where am I? In a sort of passage where there's a door at the far end and spears, 2 sets of spears, come from either side. And
Deadly obstacles, team. Someone seems to be making things difficult for you. Time Stephen's progress with care. We don't want him skewered, do we?
As noted in previous episodes, the Series 2 Hall of Spears is much more visually pleasing than the previous incarnation. Other than that, there's not much to add here. The team makes short work of the timing puzzle.
When we say now, okay? Now. Okay. Where am I? You're in a stone room with a thin open door to at the far end to your left. And there's something by it. Looks as if it's made of wood. I can't tell what it is there.
Chess piece. Looks like a chess piece.
Yeah, it looks like a chess piece.
Oh dear. This is not chess as you know it, but combat chess. Stephen, take care not to step off your own game squares. The trouble here is the enemy bishop is deadly, and you are quite vulnerable. You must move only when it's your move, and you have just seconds to complete it. A safe exit is your target. Now concentrate. The game is on, and yours is the knight's move.
It's not often that a team encounters this particular puzzle so late in a quest. Stephen begins on E1, the bishop on C8.
Team move Stephen to C2.
The crafty bishop has moved to F5.
Team respond by moving Stephen to B4, despite some tension and disagreement in the ranks.
In an attempt to limit Stephen's available moves, the bishop retreats back to C8.
Stephen then moves to C6, 2 squares in front of the bishop.
The bishop attempts to intimidate Stephen by moving to D7, but Stephen is unperturbed and exits on his next move.
This is basically on a serious note is the most direct to the door combat chess of all. It really is just a straightforward case of 3 or 4 moves and you're out of the door. I think combat chess was starting to lose its appeal by now. It is becoming very obvious that it really isn't difficult to win it, and this was indeed its last appearance. That the actual architecture was used again in season 3 for a variant of the lair of the dreaded car.
That's right. Stop there. Where am I? In a circular rocky place with a well just slightly to your right in front of you, and there's sort of the top part of a shield or something to your left slightly.
You have to say this team have overachieved because they've actually managed to get to the end of 2 levels.
Stephen.
Light source fading. Quick, team. You need Merlin's magic here.
Stephen, walk forward.
There again. You haven't any. Bad luck, Stephen. As a dungeoneer, you're great at disappearing, but this time it's once too often.
They may have overachieved, but I do think that this is a bit of an anticlimax. Just having their life force run out.
That's probably more to do with the limitations of the time. In later years, what they've probably done was, instead of just making everything go dark, there'd have been some kind of haunting. Maybe the wellway would be blocked in some way and they needed a spell to clear it or something.
Well, they've done it in the past. They could have just stuck a cavern wraith in there.
Possibly, and they could even have said it was the same cavern wraith. This is where you sense it to, or something, maybe. But it does look a little bit lame, I'd agree, just having the lights go go out.
They do look proper dejected, though, don't they? They're too off to even start walking home. They just disappear where they're standing.
I mean, that's just to save a little bit of the time, really.
And so they can make the joke about disappearing.
Now you may all become invisible.
Nice and memory!
Not the greatest team.
For reasons I'll come to shortly, it was probably not for the best that this team made it so far as they did. They're not a bad team, I must stress that. They're not a particularly dull team either, but they do differ. And there are times when they don't really seem to realise that it's over to them. They should be making the move now, and instead that they wait for prompting instead. And those teams, they're probably never going to get to the end of level 3. So you could save a lot of the broadcast and recording time by just getting rid of them as quickly as you can.
I and my dungeon answer a fresh challenge. Enter, stranger. Name yourself, please.
Karen Swanston.
Very well, Karen. Call your advisors and let them introduce themselves.
Pamela, Angela, Nicola, come.
So I love the conviction with which Karen says the word come here.
The thing I most remember about this team, I really love their Borders accents and the way they really thoroughly pronounce an awful lot of their consonants in the way the Borders people often do. They also have some interesting scenes and are also the very first team to survive the dungeon without actually winning their quest. Something of a spoiler alert in there.
The team consists of the very plucky dungeoneer Karen, and she is joined by advisors Pamela, Angela, and Nicola, and they all hail from Denholm near Hawick. We get the usual rules rundown from the very last time this series, and Treguard sends Karen on her quest.
It would have been wise, yet again, to just really, really pare the rules rundown to the absolute bare essentials. That wasted at least another 40 seconds, which is probably enough for one more room.
Where am I? You're in a room with a hole at the end and you can see the stars and there's a lever in the middle of the floor.
It appears that Tim Child was actually offering a chance of a shortcut into level 2 here, and that for once the wheel was not given a premeditated outcome. And this would be because so little time was left in the season. So if you look close at the wheel, you can see two of the options for where they could start their quest. One of them was the Monk's Cavern, which is usually the first chamber in level 2, and the other is the Hall of Folly, which is about halfway through. Well, in fact, it is halfway through level 2. If they'd landed on them, Karen and her crew might therefore have started either at the beginning of level 2 or even halfway through it. That would give them a very, very difficult learning curve. But had they been able to adjust to it, they might well have had enough time to complete their quest. Unfortunately, as we shall see at the start of the next episode, they managed to land on the level 1 option anyway, and so they had to do the quest as normal, and there was just nowhere near enough time for it.
Hold everything, for this is most inconvenient. A temporal disruption is upon us, and this adventure must wait upon the next phase. Watchers, join us again soon for Nightmare. It's well worth waiting for.
This sounds harsh from me, but I do feel that it would have been better all rounds. You remember you were talking about Stephen and how badly his team handled the bomb room and how they really should have been killed off there. I think it would have been better for everybody all round if they had been, to be honest.
Given this team some more time.
Yeah, were Karen's team good enough to win is doubtful. We'll never know for sure now. And what we do, I think we can say fairly confidently from what we do know, I do think Karen's team were better than Stephen's. Stephen's team was a bit young and a bit raw. And if had there been more time available, I would say at the very least, Karen's team were likely to get to level 3. As it was, we got stuck with Stephen's team and saw an awful lot of dithering and some rather silly handling of riddles. And although I stress they're not a bad team, they've definitely been far worse teams. They lacked the assertiveness needed to hurry a story along.
So our next episode is going to be a bit of an emotional one, really, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Because there's so much we say goodbye to. There are a lot of changes in season 3.
Yeah, seasons 1 to 3 are often seen as, are they correctly seen as one package. Each one flows naturally from the previous one. But there is actually substantial change already happening in season 3. I'm not sure, but I think we've already seen the last of Folly. I don't think he appears in the next episode, so he's already gone. We already know Cedric's gone. I think Gumboil, we've seen the last of him as well already. There is a scene with Mildred, and unfortunately, there are scenes with Casper and Gretel. I don't think Lilith doesn't appear in it because Mildred appears in the next one. There's an awful lot that's going, and an awful lot that was being retained that is also changing. Treguard is retained all the way through, but he comes across rather different in season 3. He starts his transformation from a rather sinister and rather slightly evil and slightly ambiguous figure of darkness into Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Serpent's Mouth Cavern is adjusted, no longer has Lilith's little ledge on it.
I do like what they do with it.
It's still a very clever changeover, but it's just a pity that you have to lose Lilith.
Yeah, we'll talk more about those at the time, I think.
Yeah.
We do still have one more episode to go, season 2. So until then, you can follow us on Twitter. We're at Nightmare Pod. If you want to support the podcast, we're Nightmare Pod on Patreon and Ko-fi. Speaking of Patreon, here's a shout out to Keeper of the Book of Quests, David N. Rabbit, advisors Peter Pulsford, Peter Sidon, and Stuart Leveland.
Who?
The only person to ever be a Dungeoneer and an advisor. And we've also got Dungeoneer David Thompson. You can support us on Patreon at Dungeoneer level or above to get your name mentioned on the podcast. Our website is nightmarepod.co.uk, and if you're looking for temporal discussion merchandise, including t-shirts, stickers, and other products, it's at nightmarepod.redbubble.com. Email us at podcast@nightmarepod.co.uk, and remember, don't have nightmares.
Just watch them instead. It's a memory.